The idea is you get out of North Bennett Street, you start your journey, you become a journeyman.
That's the idea.
Okay, let's stay high level. Okay, you're getting into too much detail.
Okay.
What changed? Why are you back?
He just kept begging me to come back, and like, dude, all right.
We would like to thank the sponsor of our show, Rockwool. Rockwool helps improve your quality of life, from thermal comfort, regardless of the climate zone, to quiet spaces for privacy and well-being, to peace of mind, knowing that the home is built with the goal of fire safety.
We use Rockwell in our jobs, and insulation helps drive all of those goals. Material selection is just as important as assembly design for both exterior and interior applications.
Stone wool insulation solutions from Rockwool are a good investment because they are long-lasting, durable, and resilient. They will continue to perform for generations, at least 65 years, and probably longer.
Safe and sound for interior walls, floors, and ceilings, and comfort board and comfort bat for exterior applications. Rockwool is the product for you. Thank you again to Rockwool for being a sponsor for this episode. Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. Today we are with distinguished guest Michael Burrey. Michael's my second-year professor at North Bennett Street School. Michael is a Renaissance man, I would truly say. He kind of does it all. He's very humble about it, so I'll say, no, surely not. But I would say...
No, I do think you need to explain for everybody what he knows, because he won't tell us.
So Michael, I think you originally were into timber framing, is kind of how you got your entry into everything you know. And I'm going to just get all of this wrong, and then you just correct me. But timber framing, blacksmithing, masonry work, brick firing, finished carpentry. You've got 2 homes that you're in the process of building right now.
Restoring.
Foundation work. Yeah. Well, building on one side, restoring on
True.
2 of them. Anyway, so you know a wealth of information that I think we refer to a lot of in terms of like this lost art of building. So fix the mistakes that I made. What did I miss?
Well, I don't know, from where I started,
Sure.
and how I got influenced to go down this direction.
From even childhood
what you've
to
said is
Plymouth
pretty
Plantation?
much correct in terms of the stuff I cover.
Yeah.
Just a lot of interest in terms of various traditional building methods. But where this comes from is growing up in the 1960s. I grew up right near Washington, D.C. in Hagerstown, Maryland, and that's kind of ground zero for nuclear. So I was thinking about, how do you survive that nuclear attack? I also grew up in an architect's household. So my father was working on, houses, churches, schools, light industrial. So I was, on building sites constantly. And my father was constantly working on the house that we owned in Hagerstown. So, got direct access to him and his skills and knowledge. Looking at those skills, and one of the big major things that happened was we were at Renner Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and I pulled out a book, American Barns and Covered Bridges by Eric Sloan. And I remember I can still see myself looking through that book and just how much influence that book had on me in terms of the tools, the
So Eric Sloan was a
cetera.
writer, author, collector.
Yeah.
And he wrote books on the old ways of building. And he would have these beautiful hand drawings of the tools and everything, just so people know who Eric Sloan is.
Yeah, so Eric Sloan was just a fantastic illustrator, artist, just documenter of traditional trades, et cetera, and there's multiple books on various aspects of American life, plus weather as well. He wrote a lot on weather systems.
So what was the book that got you in the door? Bridges and Trusses and Covered Building?
American Barns and Covered Bridges.
Covered Bridges.
So, but you go back, what did the nuclear fallout have to do with that?
Well, just, my elementary school had shades on it, and if there was a nuclear attack, the shade was come down, we were trained to, duck and cover and the whole bit.
Yeah.
So it was like, I'm not really interested in not surviving this or what's going to happen afterwards. So that, book, by Eric Sloan, documented a lot of the techniques of felling a tree, hewing it into a log, mortise and tenon joinery, riving out shingles, blacksmithing, covered a lot of the trades. So I started bugging my mother to go out to antique shops and go buy boring machines and forges and anvils and
because
tools.
In case it all goes boom, someone's got to rebuild. Someone's got to
rebuild. What are you going to do after you
lose electricity, lose all the modern
So where did you go to
amenities?
college?
I went to the University of Maryland, College Park.
Okay. And did you study architecture or building there?
It's one of those things where I was going to go into preservation architecture, and the University of Maryland had a program, but they stopped it 2 years before I went to college, and they started again 2 years after I left college. So there might have been some direction from above or somewhere.
We can't let this guy know anything.
Yeah,
about
exactly.
Right. So I went through landscape architecture, landscape management as a 2-year associate's degree, but then I got almost interested in agriculture. So I ended up working in the barns on the college campus. So I took care of the sheep, the cattle, the horses, and the pigs. So I had my own dorm, 3 people in the dorm, fantastic living in the middle of a bunch of animals and on a great college campus.
That's awesome.
So I went on to the 4-year program, and I organized that towards, it was a general studies major, which I ordered towards colonial American life.
So, and then you went to work. Weren't you at Colonial Williamsburg?
I was thinking about Colonial Williamsburg because I was thinking about where am I going to go with this? Growing up, I never thought, where's someone with going out and hewing logs going to end up? It's not really saleable kind of thing. So I figured I had to do something else. But I finally realized that like living history museums, like Colonial Williamsburg, like Sturbridge Village, and there's other ones around. Are a good place because I'm interested in agriculture. I'm really interested in everything that they do. So I looked at Colonial Williamsburg, but it took a long time to get in there. You'd have to start as an interpreter, and it'd be years before you got into any of the trade programs because, once you get in there, you don't want to leave.
Right.
So I thought about Sturbridge and toured there. But then my last course in college was field school in archaeology in Annapolis, Maryland, through the University of Maryland. And there I met Connie Crosby, who was a graduate student working on her PhD, but she lived in Pembroke, Massachusetts, which is kind of southeastern part of England, of New England or Massachusetts. So I stopped by to see her, and she had worked at Plymouth Plantation in the 1970s as an interpreter. She said, I still know people there. Joel Pons was there. And so he said, look, we're looking for a timber framer to build a new palisade, fortification defensive wall that surrounds the village. Plymouth Plantation it represents the year 1627, 7 years after the Pilgrims arrived in 1620, and representing that life in that 7th year.
That is perfect, right?
So it worked out very well because that included everything: archaeology and farm animals and agriculture. And
How old were you when you started there?
I was 28.
Okay, and you were there for how long?
11 years.
Okay.
So until 1999.
I have to think that preservation technology and study and the things that we understand about the past have changed a lot in the 40 years or whatever, however long that was, 30 years. Did it change? This is kind of maybe a rabbit trail, but didn't your understanding of how we used to timber frame and how we used to build, did it change much, or it didn't change?
From 17th century onwards?
No, what we knew, right? And so like the way, and this goes back to like how the Met set up their period rooms, or how Henry DuPont was buying and doing rooms. It wasn't preservation. It was kind of decoration, right? Used in the past and kind of not interpreting things properly. Did you see much of that change when you were there or over your time?
Yeah, so there was a resurgence in the 1960s of the back to land movement of timber framing.
Is that when the Timber Framers Guild got started?
So the Timber Framers Guild was founded in 1985. I started at Plymouth in 1988. Jack Sobin, who was a part of the organization of the Timber Framers Guild, was consulting on building houses in the Pilgrim Village, basically documenting houses in England and then bringing them over here, and we would build them in as period correct way as possible. So, looking at the Timber Framers Guild is a group of people who were looking at barns, looking at houses, and kind of the same thing I was doing is just thinking about it and trying to rediscover what those, the people building those from the 17th century onwards knew. There's layout marks, there's level marks, there's 2-foot marks, there's all these marks on the timbers, and Jack Sobin and others were very able to kind of sort that out. So I think a lot of the timber framing did evolve from the 1960s onwards, from something crude, just moors and tenons, but not properly done, not really based on the knowledge of the people who were building it to refine it more and to let's learn from the past and then reinstate that in our new timber framers. Because now the Timber Framers Guild has got, I don't know, 1,800 or so members at this point, and some of them have gone on new tracks, new methods of fastening the timbers together. But a lot of us have maintained the older ways as well. And I think that's just part of the evolution of any industry is you've got to adapt to the modern needs, and a lot of big timber framers are going up these days.
So you went from Plymouth Plantation to where?
So at Plymouth, I took on side jobs building like a front door surround, 1750s front door surround for someone in Kingston, Massachusetts. Sill jobs, replacement of rotted elements, and because people would call the plantation looking for people who knew about this kind of stuff. And so I did that, and then at some point, the outside jobs overwhelmed the inside job.
Yeah.
So I decided to take a leave of absence from Plymouth, because you've got a nice secure income, and you're jumping out into the world of like, if the phone doesn't ring, I don't have any work.
Right.
So that was a big one, but I never advertised. I never, it was just all word of mouth. And I just had met the right people, architectural historians, local people, and then there's a local, which once one person finds your name, they distribute it to everybody they know.
Right.
Did you do the majority of that work like with yourself or by yourself, or did you have like a team of guys that you eventually grew to?
So I would tap on my other interpretive artisans at Plymouth Plantation, and on the weekends and time off, we would tackle a job.
Nice.
And there's people that they knew that I could work with. So I kind of started out on my own, but then as I met people, and I would collaborate with them.
So your time at Plymouth Plantation, just because I don't know if people are getting the picture in their head exactly right, you were day in and day out doing timber framing, but you were in period costume and you were in period dialect, hewing logs and explaining to a bunch of modern tourists walking through what you were doing.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
They were an actor then.
So I was interpretive artist, and there was interpreters
cool.
who would learn the dialect of whatever region of England they came from. I portrayed Phineas Pratt, who was one of the carpenters who came over on one of the ships. Mayflower isn't the only one, but there's a couple other ones as well. So, I would, dress in period costume. I learned the dialect of, he was from Buckinghamshire, which is kind of a little bit north and west of
So for the rest
London.
of this podcast, we need you to speak in the dialect of the podcast.
I have to be in period dress
You
and
gotta put
in
on
the
the whole
village.
thing.
Yeah, you got a Pavlov's dog kind of thing. Yeah. So I would learn that dialect, and then I did multiple things. Mostly building that palisade that surrounds the village. It's 10 by 10 white oak post, 10 feet on center with a rail, then split posts, split pails, which are 10 feet long. So we'd have to take 12-inch diameter logs, split them into 8 pieces, and peg them up on the rail. So, but I also learned how to thatch roofs, which was pretty fantastic. I love thatching. Thatching is a fantastic material as a roof. It has got great longevity. It's got natural material. It's Phragmites or cattail that has a 1 year growth over turn. So every year you're getting another crop out of it, and thick enough. You could do a 50-year roof with a thatch.
Wow.
With maintenance every 10 years or so.
Wow. So this is total side note, but I heard this, and I feel like you're the guy to answer it, if at all. Someone was saying the term "raining cats and dogs" came from thatch roofs because it would rain so hard that the cats and dogs that had made little nests up in the roofs would then get out of the.
I've heard that too.
That's a new one to me.
You never heard that?
I wonder if it means it's not real.
No, I know birds make nests in thatch roofs, and then the bees move in. So,
No kidding.
Yeah, we had one roof that had a lot of bees in it.
Oh, that's
Interesting.
crazy.
And then how did you find North Bennett Street?
So Robert Adam, who founded the Preservation Carpentry program,
About 85 or 86, around the same time.
Yeah,
that
around
you
the
were
same
starting
time.
at Plymouth Plantation.
So he would, he called up the Plymouth Plantation, because what he would do is he would take his students through, just architectural history of New England. So he wanted to start at Plymouth Plantation and then move on from there to different time periods. So I took the phone call, came into the interpreter's lounge, and and I agreed to meet with them and the students. So I would take Robert and the students, through Plymouth and describe what we're doing, just the methodology we were doing, the mindset that we wanted to keep. We wanted to make as accurate a portrayal of those 17th century houses as we possibly could. We'll never know, how good it was because everything's gone.
Right.
But we would do a lot of archaeological research. We would work with people like Abbott Cummings, who wrote mass houses of, 17th century houses of Mass, or period house of Mass Bay. But also work with the archaeologists from Jamestown, Virginia, and we went down and met with them, standing on the original site of Jamestown, and tried dialoguing with them because they've got the holes in the ground, but they're trying to figure out what's above it. So we would come back to Plymouth and recreate what they, thought, and we would massage that and send it back to them. So Robert came through, and we got to know each other, and eventually I was asked to be an advisor of the program, which I did for a number of years.
Okay.
And then was in 2015, the previous instructor in PC had to move on to other things, and I was tapped to apply for the program.
Yeah.
And got in.
So what's fun, I think, about North Bennett is kind of all of our instructors are, very versed in a lot of things because the Preservation Carpentry program as a whole is very touch on this, touch on this, touch on this, touch on this, touch on this. And you don't really get to do a deep dive into anything. And so, Steve last year, I think doors was kind of one of his niches. He's made a bunch for Peabody Essex. He's, made a bunch all over. He does windows and other stuff as well. But, that kind of seemed to be one of his things that he liked. Robert Adam, big on windows, but also hardware is a big niche of his. And, for you, it seems to be timber framing is like the big niche of yours. So it is kind of interesting just as we have all these professors come back and come in, they're just like, oh yeah, I'm really good at like Rich Freiberg, known for turning, as well as other stuff. And so anyway, it's just a very interesting, fun thing because there's so much in the world of preservation. And I feel like you really opened my eyes to a lot older of a world of preservation, thinking about like first period homes, even just your history and the land management, talking about like the felling of the trees. Like just recently, we felled a tree at a student's house thing that there was, the tree was felled, cut into pieces, and then we pulled it over and got to hew the log into a, square-ish piece. Then we got to see a wood miser put to use, and it's now cut into 5/4 little boards, and it's now sitting in the back of my yard, ready to be milled into a table, or not ready yet, but it's drying. And so, I don't know, I feel like that was just a unique thing that because I'm telling him, oh, we're doing this right now. He's like, oh, I never even saw that. I never.
Yeah, we never did that. We never went to Plymouth Plantation either. And so It's interesting because I was there 91 to 93, and I didn't know about Plymouth Plantation. So it's interesting. I think one of the directions I want to go is now, let's go here first. You got Notre Dame burns down.
Yeah.
You got tapped to build one of the trusses, right? Or
I work on the steeple.
The steeple.
On the spire.
Okay.
Sorry, the spire.
So just tell us how that thing in 4 or 5 minutes, just that whole Notre Dame, and being tasked to do that, because I don't think there are many Americans asked to work on.
There's 9 Americans went over and
Okay.
worked on it, and mostly in the timber framing aspect. But that is goes back to after I left Plymouth Plantation, I founded my own company. Would work, restoring houses around the South Shore area. So one of the fellows I worked with, Joe Chetwin, knew this couple in Norwell, Rick and Laura Brown of Hans House Studio. So he said, they're working on a project that you'd be interested in seeing. So he took me over there, and they're in the process of building a 1785 wooden crane that was used to build the stone bridges in Paris. And so this couple is very interested in, exploring ancient technologies, exploring, how did the Egyptians raise a obelisk? I mean, it's a 300-ton piece of stone that they're getting from horizontal to vertical.
Right.
And so they worked it out. It was on a PBS Nova program on that.
Wait,
So
how did they build a wooden crane? Can we go back to that? Is that just a bunch of boards sistered together and like really long?
Well, there's
How
a
big
picture
was
in the
crane?
bench room of it on
No
the
kidding.
cabinet on the right-hand side.
Oh my gosh.
So it's basically, it's got a base and a central pivot point, and then the crane pivots on that point, and then down here is a squirrel cage where one or two people would walk in that cage, and that's your powering mechanism for lifting. So the rope would go up and down, and they had a couple different points that you could stretch the rope through.
Oh my gosh.
So they would do these workshops where they'd pick something and build it and explore the ideas of it. But they do a deep dive first in terms of research. They'd build a model and then actually execute it. So
Wow.
I got involved in building the Turtle, which was the first true submarine, American submarine
way.
built during the Revolutionary
Yeah.
War. The Bushnell brothers, just outside of New York City, realized you could set gunpowder off underwater. All right, so the next problem is, how do you get it get it next to the British man of war and attach it and set it off. So there's been previous submarines, like one in the 17th century in London, but they worked out all the details of the concept of having it float, but then sinking it, and then how do you move forward and back and up and down? How do you attach the bomb? So basically, it's called the Turtle because they said it looked like two turtle shells put together. And that was in a letter to Thomas Jefferson after Revolutionary War.
Wow.
That, because he was interested in, the technology of how you
Right.
do this. So they described the whole thing in the letter.
It was all built out of wood, right?
And so we took a 6-foot diameter Sitka spruce from the West Coast. We split it in half. We hauled the halves. We rounded the outside of them. And we had, metal lays. And there's one fellow that has a copper dome on it, about that size, with glass in it.
Is
so you
that
can
how
see.
they waterproofed it with copper? Or
Well, it was just a dome. He took a flat sheet of copper and beat it into this dome.
And it worked.
And it worked. They poured, it's just high details, but yeah, we took it out in the Duxbury Harbor. We put it, out on one of the cranes that drops boats in.
Yeah.
Put it in, didn't let it loose, but he would go forward and back. And then the U.S. Navy was involved too. They came up and watched us build this thing because it's one of their hallmarks
Yeah.
of their program. And they said, "Why don't you bring it down to Annapolis and we'll put it in our pool and we'll move it back and forth and do some testing, dynamic testing on it." So now that submarine is in the National Spy Museum in Washington D.C.
Oh, that's pretty
so
cool.
So they were impressed with it. They thought it wasn't going to operate very well, but did reasonably well. So anyway, that's a long story.
That's really cool.
Now that's no rabbit tail.
I love it.
So when Notre Dame burned,
Right.
Rick and Laura got a lot of calls about you should get involved in it. I was like, well, how are we going to do that? So they did start doing some exploration, contacted the Carpenters Without Borders, Carpenters Sans Borders. I don't know, the French is beyond me, but it's a group of carpenters from all around the world who get together and build an interesting project like this. So, Carpenters Without Borders, there was a big debate with Notre Dame. We don't have the people around to build these trusses anymore. We're going to have to do it in steel or, all kinds of other proposals to do it with.
Interesting, yeah.
But they determined that, the Carpenters Without Borders got a bunch of timbers together in 7 days' time, cut and raised truss number 7 of, one of the sections of Notre Dame, and raised it saying, look, this technology is still here. We've got it. We've got people around the world. We've got
Right.
enough French carpenters. We've got some other carpenters we can tap into and build it. So with that, they contacted Carpenters Without Borders and then got to meet the architects of Notre Dame Cathedral. And we built truss number 6 of the choir section of Notre Dame down in Washington, D.C., outside the Catholic University of America. And 8 days, we took 40 white oak logs. We hewed them, scribed them into truss number 6, and raised it in front of the basilica there. And then took it down, raised it in the middle of the Washington Mall between the Capitol and the Washington Monument, took it down, and then moved it into the American Building Museum. So and then the architects had occasion to come through because they were talking about their project. They came to see the truss, and they were very impressed. And then there was a dialogue that started happening to, get some Americans over there. And so Jackson Dubois and myself were able to go to work for Aslan, which is one of the 4 companies that got the contracts to build the whole wooden roof and the spire.
Now, Aslan, right? They actually do windows and doors too, don't they?
They do windows and doors, high end.
Yeah. We
They're a competitor. I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, they're if you go to their website, the things that they build, they built a ship and they did a bunch of other stuff. It's an impressive company. I think it's 200 years old or something.
No, 1965.
65?
I think so. Yeah, 19.
Oh, I thought it was much older than that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I want to do is understanding. You talk about thatch roofs, right? You talk about linseed oil paint, old growth wood. We're building things, and I feel like at North Ministry we were learning how things were built in the past. Maybe this is just a Brent question, but walk me through from your perspective, because I have a low tolerance for AZEK and for concrete and for the other things that we're choosing to build with. And my deal is that if we just knew how to build properly again, we wouldn't have to use those products. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
I agree with that. I mean, I don't like seeing all the plastic all over the ground, all the shavings from cutting all the plastics, and that gets mixed in with the soil, and it becomes a contaminant with everything. And what do you do with it after its life is done? I mean, and I've heard a lot of difficulties with it in terms of expansion, contraction, and movement, and just aesthetics, and just general feel. The carpenters working with it really don't like it.
Well, there's the deck material. I don't want to just throw everybody under the bus, but you got on that, and after 2 or 3 years, those boards will warp really bad and just look like you're on a silly slide going across those decks. So if the guys that's listening out there and go, what am I supposed to use? Wood's no good these days. It's finger jointed pine or whatever it is. You would say what?
Well, that's the difficulty. Is we've gone through our virgin forests, our old growth forests, and used it all up. That's one of the reasons I certainly advocate preserving old houses, because all the wood is it's 200 years old and it's still in good condition. But you have to be aware of that. So obviously today, where do you find old wood? It's a matter of what I do, and this is kind of unique. And I don't know if I go out and find logs. I buy logs that have white pine logs that have a certain quality. They have a much orangier heartwood to them. They're heavier, denser. So that's what I bring those back. I use the Wood-Mizer bandsaw mill to saw them out and then stack them and sticker them and use those for our wood. But when you get to decks and things like that, I don't know. I mean, there's other tropical hardwoods that are out there as well. But there's also things like locust. I think what gets that back to is our forest and trying to maintain our forest and raise trees to a certain age that we can have a much more reliable quality to them, which I don't see happening.
I didn't even think about, you made a good point about the PVC, and the plastics, because when I cut PVC trim, that plastic is so annoying and just goes everywhere. And then if you don't have dust extraction, it is getting into the soil.
Wait, where do you use plastic? Not on our jobs,
back
right?
in the day. Well, I've cut it before.
Yeah.
Like PVC and AZEK, and it's just, to your point, I hate the feel of it. I hate, it's kind of floppy, and I don't know. But I didn't even think about the contamination. That's a pretty big deal, because a lot of guys just take their blower and blow their dust away,
Yeah, it becomes incorporated in the subsoil or topsoil and around the building site, or blows into the woods or the weeds or wherever.
It's awful.
So do you like my solution on the woods would be, you bring up locust, you're obviously cutting your own logs, but I think thermowood has good opportunity, and I don't know what the long-term effects of that, but basically they cook the wood, right?
Yeah, I've heard about that now.
Bake the sugars out of it, and it becomes a much more stable, long-lasting wood. You look at Ocular, and they're kind of pickling and heating the wood. Caboni, there are good woods out there, or good solutions. You talk about that. Yeah, you talk about the we use sapele for our windows and doors. Mm-hmm. We're starting to use red grandis, which is a eucalyptus. So I think there are better alternatives than just finger jointed pine,
right?
But it's not. You got to ask for it, and I'm finding that a lot of my education is just these are the woods we use. We've used Spanish cedar before. We've used these other things. There are other things, but they're not readily available on the shelves. I mean, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I really haven't gone down and looked at those aspects, because I rely on my own sources of sometimes I start in the woods and I pull trees out from the woods. So
True Renaissance, man.
I'm
like
telling
you said, yeah.
I'm telling you. We went to that where you keep the wood miser. That's one of your shops.
Yeah,
You got many satellite locations kind of all over. But I just
Safe houses. They're safe houses.
yeah.
Well, I just want to speak to like some of the cool things that Michael's doing that just like you're saying, you don't think to ask for them. You don't think to do these things. Like Michael, you have essentially a lumber yard at this place where he has hand selected all of these trees. You know, he's got white oak, he's got red oak, he's got a bunch of pine, and they're all just the straightest trees you've ever seen. These long, I mean, you've really hand curated a lot of them, and they're sitting there ready to be quarter sawn or however you want to process that wood because you've got the machine to do it, to handle it. You've got a big lolly. I don't remember the
lull
non-
or a telehandler.
Yeah, telehandle.
Wait, so how much? How big a warehouse is this? How big
Well,
a
it's,
store?
I don't know. It used to be a sawmill 15, 16 years ago. They closed up operations. They used to have beef cattle, and kind of, this is in the middle of a residential area, but it's kind of isolated because it's got woods all the way around it. But it has a big barn big enough we can cut timber frames in. It's got a yard big enough to have a log pile and the wood miser and stack boards in. So it worked out.
How many
pretty-
board feet
pretty
of
well.
lumber do you have stacked up in there?
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot in the barn, but this is the thing that Jackson referenced these logs on our Union Street Hanover site. We pulled 14,000 board feet of really nice, high quality white pine oak out of there, and it's old growth. It matches the growth patterns of old growth timber that we see in houses. Well, we came to the site one Friday, and across the street there's a crane, and they're pulling out another 40 trees across the street. So we went and talked to them and said, because they're straight trees and there's very small branches. I know from our site, they're really good quality. So we looked at them and agreed to buy 4 log truck loads, which is like 15 or 16,000 board feet. And one load went to Bob Phillips in Middleborough, and we took 3 loads. So we got like almost 11,000 board feet in the yard of these gorgeous, straight, high volume of heartwood versus sapwood, small sapwood layers, because the sapwood is what rots,
Right.
And that's what you really need to eliminate. So, a lot of these logs are, smaller diameter, but we can get a good timber out of them. A lot of those would have been just chipped and sent to a chipper pile. But, this is opportunity where you see opportunity, you jump on it and you get those logs, because that's a rare find. The hauler of the logs said, you guys really lucked out in terms of, getting that quality of logs.
They would have just turned them into mulch.
Yeah, a lot of it, because some were sawable diameter and saleable, but a lot of them were 8, 10, 12 inches in diameter, and that's kind of marginal in terms of sawing.
And you buy these like to sell them or just for your own personal stash?
As a personal stash, yeah.
To use
Nice.
them,
Use them, yeah.
because he's timber framing, a whole bunch. I mean, that's primarily what those are going to be turned into is timbers, right?
Timbers and floorboards. These are going to be really nice floorboards because
Right.
they have very small knot patterns and nice and straight and clean.
So,
But also,
so
just
that
really
lumber's
quick.
yeah. Go ahead.
Because also what he'll do, the other source for your lumber is you will disassemble houses. So like people will be tearing down a house. You'll hear about it because you've got a network of spies all throughout the, country or the Northeast, and just telling you, hey, there's this old, what was the Duxbury house, or not the Duxbury house, the West Bridgewater house that was just being taken down.
So gorgeous house, 1790s, built by a judge who was part of the Massachusetts legislature that voted in the Massachusetts Constitution.
So he's got all these people telling him, there's this house, they're tearing it down. Then he goes and talks to the general contractor, whoever's going to be doing whatever, and he goes, well, I'll take all the stuff that you're not using.
Yeah,
and-
well, can we get salvage rights basically? And he was happy about it because it was less than the dumpster, and he had affinity for the house itself, and tried looking at restoring it, but it was the ground floor system, timber frame system was completely gone. You'd have to raise the whole thing up. Definitely possible to do, but the economics of doing that in that area was marginal.
Yeah.
So we were able to go in and take out fireplace surrounds and stair railing and plank frame windows and decorative dental work on the front.
So there's all these, parts and pieces that Michael's amassed. You've got,
like a
bunches of
network.
houses hidden
Yeah.
on your property, which
You
is
should open a salvage yard. Sounds like
Well,
all your free time.
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in my yard. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you sell that lumber?
Yeah, I mean, if I have occasional, but
You're not.
usually it's hard to, the economics of selling it, in small batches is small, but try to use it mostly for our own work.
If you look at new houses being built today, what do you think the worst thing is we're doing?
It's the temporary nature of them, I think. I mean, I see houses going up in a very short period of time. I look at the quality of materials and some of the workmanship. I think that, I don't know, there's some house association that said houses are only meant to last like 50 years or have a lifespan of 50 years of anything new that we're building. And I don't know, I mean, we need houses and they go up quickly and we can house people, but in terms of environmental impact and longevity, I just don't see it.
So, and then I agree. And I guess I'm sitting there going, so someone, let's say it's not and you may not have an opinion on this, but I'd be curious. Someone's building a, $2 million, $3 million house. And what kind of, and they're doing a colonial house. I mean, what kind of mistakes are you seeing that they're doing that they could take advantage of? Just if they did three things, here would make it better. There are things like that you look at and think?
In terms of building a new structure based on historic examples.
Yeah.
I mean, following geometry is a proportioning device that has been used from the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans, and it was used up through.
What did you call it?
Practical geometry. So using geometry as basically what you can do with a straight edge, a pair of dividers, the ability to count. You can design anything from common house to Notre Dame Cathedral. And Notre Dame Cathedral is all based on geometry. Swinging arcs, following a line, and it's all proportional to each other based on, just a series of daisy wheels and king's crosses and other, geometric proportioning devices. So, getting those aesthetics, like you do with your work, is just getting those proportions right, is very important.
Yeah.
And you could do that on simple houses, quick. It don't have to be a $2 million house. It could
Right.
be a $600,000 or $700,000 house. You could still use geometry and really refine it and have it much more pleasant to live in. And I think going back to your previous question, I think that's the biggest mistake we make today is just going through a catalog, picking out let's use a Palladian window and stick it here. Let's use a 1720s front door surround and use it there. Just mixing all these things up that don't belong together and don't have any proportional relationship to each other. Whereas that's a fairly simple thing to do with geometry and just education towards that. Living in a house like that might not feel comfortable. They might not understand why they feel uncomfortable, but it's just you need to live in a house which is comfortable to live in, and it can be the practical concrete nature of it, but it could also be just the aesthetics of the design.
I can't remember who I heard it from, whether it was just independently in reading stuff or hearing in class or hearing it from you. But they did a study on people who were in a designed space versus people who are not in the design space. So like a very disorganized space versus an organized space. And they saw their stress levels tangibly rise as they walked into, quote unquote, ugly house versus a well-designed proportional house.
There's been talks too about people walking into Frank Gehry buildings where the windows do all this stuff and the walls are moving and everything else and people getting physically sick.
Yeah.
And so, they're not, they might look good from the street, but you don't want to work there.
Right. Or live there.
So, I would look at, and so number one was design, right? Just kind of the simplicity of how they used to put together the practical geometry you're talking about. And then, missing that. I look at things like, keystones. You talked about, houses with the facade having 3 Palladian windows on the front. You're just like, what are you doing? You shape it and then the placement of a keystone, a jack arch. I don't know. There's just simple things like that if they just look to the past, they would understand the size of a keystone and just where it goes. And right. I mean, there's
Right.
things like that are low hanging fruit too.
Yeah, because I think in the past, you were taught practical geometry throughout grade school. It was a very principal part of the subject, and so your mind would start thinking in those terms, in terms of your aesthetics. So I don't know to what degree every house was started out with geometry, because you're building let's say, full cape from Cape Cod, or it's now all over the place.
Right.
Once you've built a number of them, you're going to have this. You don't have to get your pair of dividers out every time. You have a
Right.
certain mindset as to what
Right.
what to do.
Well, there's something too, just as we've been doing the practical geometry, and Jane Griswold came and spoke to us, there was something about like she was swinging all the arcs and like doing the practical geometry and then showing how these foundational points, like where these intersections of certain lines lay, and then put it over like a engineered drawing of a timber frame. She was like, this is how you're supposed to build these timber frames because of their stress loads and because of where everything, the weight paths and everything gets passed down. But then it followed the geometric design of it. So it was almost just like, yeah, this is not only the strongest way to build, but it's also an aesthetic way to build. It's almost like your mind had some sort of understanding at a subconscious level.
So is your if you're at a house, was there a question, or you just?
I was looking to Michael to verify.
Yeah.
So let's say it's we were just up in Salem yesterday, looking at Samuel McIntyre. So
Pretty ugly.
Let's just pick one of his houses. Would it have started with him a pattern book, James Gibb or Abraham Swan, or some pattern book that he and his patron were looking at, or would it have started with the practical geometry?
Well, probably both. I think in a lot of those design books, there are just like the Benjamin Asher Benjamin books. You get the lines being swung, but not enough information to you have to know a basis of information to understand that drawing to begin with. So I think that practical geometry is something that's passed from master to apprentice to journeyman, but also in school, it's also built up there. So I don't know, it's a combination of the two, I think.
I guess I
We
hear
kinda feed off
when
each
I'll
other.
talk about the golden ratio or something, I get pushback. That's not how they design buildings. And I'm not saying that they and maybe this is the question, I don't think they looked at it and said the golden ratio is how we're going to design some, but they did look at the geometry of it and say this is how we're going to design it, right?
Right.
Well, and the irony, just what Jane taught us about the practical geometry, it reiterates the golden ratio kind of through and throughout it. Because if you take one of the daisy wheels, which is where you swing a circle and then you swing a bunch of 6 other circles around it, that leaves you with an opportunity to build a square, which is a true square. And then if you extend it to the other dots in the circle, it makes a rectangle at that 2-to-1 ratio, which is that golden ratio. So
3 to 5
what they
is the
were
golden
using,
ratio. 2 to 1 is just a 1 to 2
Sorry,
proportion.
sorry,
Yeah.
the
But yeah,
3 to
no,
5.
yeah.
that is the practical geometry does reflect that golden ratio. So you're kind of saying the same thing.
Well, but I get pushback on it, and I'm just like, I'm wondering whether one of my heroes, Asher Benjamin or Samuel McIntyre, if they started with one over the other, or just kind of, I'm curious when they're sitting there thinking about designing a house, what came first, right? And was it just like today we see a picture or something and go, oh, I really like to do that, and you do a version of it, or is it I'm going to sit down and I'm going to actually lay out this triangle, and then I'm going to figure out where the front door goes? I don't think it went that way, but maybe it did.
I mean, every architectural style is based off of the previous architectural styles. It kind of gains influence and slowly morphs through time. I don't know. That's a good question, because I think you might have a client who wants to build a house of a certain size. So you start out with that size, either the footprint or the elevation drawing, and work your geometry based on that.
But
Because what I've found in my work, there's a couple of things I've used geometry on. One was a gazebo, that's an 8-sided gazebo that both a sectional drawing and the plan directly relate to each other through geometry, and the other is a Shakespeare stage gallery that I use the King's Cross to proportion it out, how high are each of the stages, and then how far does it jetty out. All those things are just it's just a beautiful way to take the cross-sectional drawing and use the elevation drawing, because they relate to each other. So I don't know. I think it's probably a combination of the
I guess
two.
I think we were up in Salem, saw that John Wood house, 1684, right? Casement windows, leaded glass.
John Ward House.
Ward. John Ward house. And that to me seems like a primitive structure, okay, versus, something that 1724 was that other house we looked at.
The Gardner Pingree House.
What was next door to that Georgian one?
That was the Crown and Shield Bentley House.
Yeah, so 1724, right?
Yeah.
It is organized. They didn't get the classical order right, but you see this development of kind of a medieval house. I wouldn't suspect there was practical geometry on that house. That 1724 house, what is that? 40 years later, clearly they had started to follow that, but they didn't have, like my research for my book on millwork. There's been a couple of studies that have been done, one by Helen Park, another one by Ellen Schemelman, they've gone through and studied what books were available in America, what pattern books were available. And there really wasn't very many in 1720. And it's not until 1730 that there was like 5 or 6. In 1740, there's like 8. And anyway, it grows obviously as we get, but at that time, they wouldn't have been able to. It's just interesting to me because I'm thinking there's a very medieval house, but by 40 years later, they had a clear, different picture of what a house should look like. And I'd just be curious where that design came from.
Yeah, I haven't really done the research on that myself, but I think most of it, from my understanding, is coming out of England and originating there, coming over to colonies as pattern books, and then you move on from there.
What did you think the skill level in America was for craft, in Plymouth Plantation, and then even later?
I think it's incredibly high, and we don't really have an appreciation for that today. With the rate we demolish houses, it's easy to demolish it and throw it in a dumpster versus just to really appreciate the workmanship that went into it. But I think when going back to Notre Dame Cathedral and working with 11 fantastic French carpenters, and there's the compagnon. You can join the compagnon as an apprentice, and it's like an 8-year apprenticeship, and then journeyman, and then a master. And they still have retained that system from 600 or 800 years ago. And it's a continual passing of information, and it's a mandatory passing of information from the master to the apprentice and the journeyman, and then you go, what they call the Tour de France, not the bicycle tour, but then they spend the time,
that's the journeyman's
their
tour,
journeyman
right?
time when they're moving from shop to shop.
Yeah.
So I see that as just a tremendous way to pass that knowledge along from one generation to the next. So I think it happened in the colonies, but I think what happened over here is we had such a huge demand for houses that we needed to really, make houses faster, and people would show up without those qualifications but still learn a little bit, enough to know what to do, but not really get the full information.
So you say a house, had a very high level of craftsmanship, but compared to England, it was pretty low, right?
Well, craftsman, it might have been not quite as skilled. I mean, there's some things. I have an 1842 house where, there's the parlor room in it. I had to do some work on it because the summer beam going across it was bending, and it turned out it's a 14 by 16 foot room, and the summer beam is 4 3/4 inches wide and 7 inches deep. And they took 2-inch cogs out of both sides of it to put the joists in. There's like 3/4 inch web in the center of it.
It's like how's that going to hold up?
You'd think that they would know better than that. So it's great craftsmanship, but there's some areas where it didn't quite work out.
Yeah, no, I get you.
I think one of the interesting, fun things that we've gotten to see that's a strength of yours is almost, I'm not trying to discount your engineering knowledge as well, but you kind of have this understanding of houses in a way that I don't think a lot of people do, or structures, I guess is a better way of saying it, where your mind almost works in a way where you can see a weight and see how much the house is holding and go, yeah, that'll work. Do you want to speak to kind of where that came from, and if that is just a superpower that you have, or just something that is based in all these things?
I don't know. I have someone else who calls me the house whisperer, but I don't know. It's my father was an architect, so I think some of that comes from him in terms of understanding structural loads as they pass down through a house. A lot of it comes from working with the Timber Framers Guild. I belong to the TTRAG, which is the Traditional Timber Framers Research Advisory Group. It's a smaller group that's more interested in the traditional aspects of it. And then we have engineers, Janet Kane, a structural engineer, and she's come here to the school to teach structural engineering just a day or so, just to get an understanding of it. And listening to engineers and working with engineers and understanding structural loads and load paths, starting at the ridge, and how it all pushes and pulls against each other. I don't know, just along with just practical experience of building things, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. at some point you realize that the paint actually has a structural component to it. In some houses, they're so far gone, but
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just a kind of visualization. It's a three-dimensional visualization. I don't know. Well, Jack Sobin came up with it because he found it in a literature from 1806. But you build an air castle in your mind. Basically, in your mind, you build this shape and you put pressures on it. You think about the rafters, then you got tie beam. So where the rafters want to go outwards, they need something to pull them together, either a collar in the center or out, down farther. So. And just the loads and passing from one place to another and moving down through the building.
I'm hearing experience. I'm hearing you kind of get an eye for it after a while.
Well, it's just awesome because we're jacking up this barn and, we're all kind of like, does that sound okay? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And then he's like, this is a relatively light structure because it was balloon framed. It wasn't timber framed. So, I'm sure you've seen far sketchier. And then.
Oh, yeah, I've dealt with far sketchier,
yeah. Well, super cool. All right.
You need to start a YouTube called The House Whisperer.
Yeah.
Show all your adventures.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It'd be very interesting.
Yeah, it would. Well, do you have anything else you feel like you want to talk about or share, or feel like this generation?
What's next? Do you have a big project like Notre Dame coming up or anything like that?
No, I hope. I'd love to get back to Europe somewhere and work on, because that's really my time period. I really like the medieval English and French and German time period, because that's the kind of the heyday of timber framing, where you're really celebrating the frame with chamfers and carving and spandrel beams, and it's an absolutely fantastic way to build. And they're still around from the year 1200s, and people are just living in them as normal houses over in England and France. And I've done a little bit of that for my own house and a couple projects around New England, but I'd really like to have the opportunity to build a open hall house, the medieval style.
Yeah.
It'd be fantastic.
It'd be really cool.
Yeah.
What's the ideal period of that thing? Like
1300s, 1400s.
13, 14. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Not many of those buildings standing around, are there?
No, not around New England.
Yeah.
Do you have an input on Japanese joinery and their timber framing?
I've admired it for years, and I'd love to learn more about it. I'd love to go to Japan and experience it, but.
Do you know what era? Is it from the same era? Would it be a medieval, or is it later than that?
I'm sure it must be. I don't know enough depth on that.
Yeah, because you see some of the way they put timber frames together, and it's kind of scary.
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, you've got your two houses right now that at least we've seen. I'm sure there's other projects in the mix as well.
Yeah, there's a possibilities of other stuff coming down the line. We've got another open lot that we can, maybe I have a 1733 house frame in my yard. Maybe that could get put up there.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's that medieval English Hull house.
Yeah.
Do a small version of it.
Well, cool. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for being a guest.
Thanks for coming
Thank
in.
you for having me on.
Appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.
And then we're going to have you back on at a little later today at the King's Chapel. So
Okay.
talk about that.
What period is that building?
1740s, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic structure, fantastic frame in the roof, proper 18th century king post trusses.
Great.
So get excited for that. That'll be a future episode. But thanks for watching this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.